We're here in Barcelona at MWC to take a look at all that's new and exciting in the world of mobile technology. There are a few key announcements to take a closer look at though, so without further ado, let's start at LG. So here we are with the LG G5, and it's had a slight design change. You can see that the edges are a little bit rounder than they were on the G4, and if you turn it around to the back, also see that the back-mounted controls have changed as well. So we've got a redesigned power button which also doubles up as a fingerprint scanner, and on the side we have the volume rocker, whereas before it used to be on the back. And that's because we've had to make way for this new dual camera. So it's a dual lens, one is 8 megapixels and one is 16 megapixels, and the 8 megapixel camera is a ultra wide lens, so 135 degrees, which is actually 15 degrees wider than the human field of vision, so very wide indeed. In terms of what's under the hood here, we've got Qualcomm's brand new Snapdragon 820 processor and 4 gig of RAM to support it, and there is a 32 gig of onboard storage, as well as a micro SD card slot around here, which can boost the storage by up to 2 terabytes, so plenty of storage there. So it's now a full metal unibody design in place of the removable leather and polycarbonate covers on the G4. But just because it's unibody doesn't mean that LG has thrown away the opportunity to replace the battery. It's now a rather innovative design with a small button down here that you simply press in, and the bottom will come out and you can replace the battery. That also opens the phone up to lots of other options for modular design, such as the Hi-Fi Plus module and the Cam Plus module, which you can read more about in our full hands-on review. As for the screen, there's been a few changes there as well. It's now 5.3 inches, down from 5.5, but it's still a 2K LCD screen. But it does come with LG's new always-on technology. LG says that we check our phones about 150 times a day, and that's quite a battery drainer. And so what it allows is for you to have time, date, and notification information always on your display, so you're not always waking it up and draining the battery. LG reckons this will take only 0.8% of your battery per hour that it's on. LG has always been dedicated to offering a really top-notch audio experience, and the G5 is no different. Of course, it still supports 24-bit high-res audio playback, but it's also one of the first handsets to support aptX HD, a new Bluetooth format that is able to stream up to 24-bit 48 kilohertz. Of course, what you need is a compatible handset or device like the LG G5, and a compatible accessory like LG's Tone Platinum headset. Overall, the LG G5 is certainly shaping up to be one of the most exciting launches of the show. We can't wait to get our hands on it, but you can read our full hands-on review on whathifi.com. Now we're over here at the Sony stand, where Sony has launched 2 new handsets, the Xperia X, which Sony is calling a super mid-range phone, and the Xperia XA, a more standard mid-range. So let's take a look at the X to begin with, and just taking a look around the phone, it looks very much like the flagship Z5. So you've got the fingerprint sensor built into the power button alongside some volume controls and the shutter button for the camera. Under the hood there is a mid-range Snapdragon 650 processor and 3 gig of RAM, and over here you've got the SIM card tray which doubles as a micro SD card slot for boosting the 32 gig memory up to 200 gig. Now looking at the front of the phone, it's a 5-inch full HD display based on Android Marshmallow, Android 6.0. On the back we have a 23 megapixel camera which features predictive hybrid autofocus, which basically will allow the camera to predict where movement is going to happen in the shot and make sure that your pictures always stay sharp. And on the front we have a 13 megapixel camera. Built into it are a lot of the things we've come to expect from Sony, things like 2-day battery life and of course high-res audio support. Now moving on to the Xperia XA, and it's still a 5-inch display but 720p this time, and it's quite interesting in that it's completely edge to edge, so it's a much narrower fit even though it's still a 5-inch display. Looking around it kind of resembles more of the older Sony phones, so you've got the circular power button, no fingerprint sensor, alongside the volume and shutter button. Sony's gone for a MediaTek processor, which is probably slightly lesser powered than the Qualcomm one, and 2 gig of RAM. And over here you have the old style SIM tray, but it's still got a micro SD card slot available to boost the memory up, again up to 200 gig, but there is only 16 gig onboard storage on this model. On the back, it's a 13 megapixel camera, no predictive hybrid autofocus here, just the regular hybrid autofocus. And on the front, it's an 8 megapixel camera. Again, built on Android Marshmallow 6.0, we'll still get the 2-day battery life that Sony is so well known for. Also, no high-res support here, which will be a bit of a shame for high-res audio fans. Again, we'll be putting a full hands-on review of this onto whathifi.com, so check that for our full thoughts. Samsung had one of the biggest announcements of MWC. Not only did Mark Zuckerberg turn up on stage, but it also announced 2 huge flagship devices, the S7 and the S7 Edge. Taking a look at the S7 first, it's a very similar design to the S6, in fact, just a slightly more refined back panel, so it curves round just a little bit more, so it feels that little bit more comfortable in the hand. You've still got the fingerprint scanner as before. Everything on the bottom is the same, the headphone jack, the speaker, and the charging port, still a USB, regular micro USB rather than USB Type-C as on the G5. On the top here, most people will be very happy to see the micro SD card slot make a triumphant return, so you can now boost the 32 gig of onboard storage by up to 200 gig. You've got the same 5.12K super bright Super AMOLED screen, so you're going to get some really punchy colours and great deep blacks from that. It runs on Android Marshmallow, so the most recent Android 6.0 operating system, and it's just a really nice device. It's still, the build quality still feels fantastic, and just a really lovely device to hold. Now, taking a look at the camera on the back, it's actually dipped down from 16 megapixels to 12 megapixels, but we all know never to judge a camera on its megapixel count. And basically what Samsung has done here is it's made the aperture larger, so it's now f1.7 from f1.9, which is going to let in 25% more light for better low light photography. And it's also made the pixels bigger, so they can now absorb up to 50% more light. Samsung has also included a technology called dual pixel autofocus, which is usually found on DSLR cameras, and basically means that you're going to get some really fast autofocus. Samsung told us it should focus in about 0.2 seconds, so you're never going to miss that Kodak moment. So as I turn the phone around, you'll also get to take a look at another one of Samsung's new features, which is the always-on display. Now, Samsung, like LG, told us we check our phones around 150 times a day just to find out things like time and date and notification information. You can now have that on your display at all times, and luckily it's not going to be a battery drainer. Samsung told us that if you have this on for 10 hours, it's probably only going to drain about 5% of your battery. And if you consider how much battery you're probably going to use by waking your phone over 150 times a day, we imagine that's going to be quite a considerable saving. Under the hood, we've got one of Samsung's octo-core Exynos processors and 4 gig of RAM, and there's actually a bigger battery as well, which is really good. It was down to about 2,550 milliamp hours in the S6, and this is back up to 3,000, so hopefully with all the battery saving tech that's also built into the S7, we should see a really strong battery life. Now, moving on to the S7 Edge, there are a lot of things that are very similar to, with the S7 Edge compared to the S7, but we'll start with what's different. It's now a 5.5-inch display, which is up from last year's 5.1. Obviously, there was an S6 Edge Plus, which was at 5.7 inches, so this sits somewhere in between and leaves the kind of bigger screen size to the Note family, which we're probably going to see the 6th iteration of later on this year. So you've still got the curved display, as the name would suggest, and at the back it has this slightly more curved edges, a bit like the S7. So Samsung has been able to make sure that the camera sits a lot more flush to the back panel, which should make people a little happier. It's the same camera in the S7 Edge as it is in the S7, so that 12 megapixel camera with the dual pixel autofocus technology. Something that's a little bit new in this, which obviously isn't in the S7, is Edge View. So it's now thicker than it was on the S6. So you now get 2 rows, and you can store your favorite apps there. You can also store tasks. So rather than just open the camera, you can open the front-facing camera, for example. So you can store things like that there. You have the People Edge, which we did have before, so you can store 5 of your most visited contacts for easy access. And Samsung also told us that it's opened the SDK up for the App Edge. So as you can see here, we have a Yahoo News feed, and who knows what developers will be developing for it, but you could be able to scroll through your Facebook feed, through your Twitter feed on this before we know it. Under the hood is the same octo-core Exynos Samsung processor that is in the S7, and we're told that it should provide a 30% faster performance, and there's also a 64% boost in the GPU as well, so you should see some really fast, detailed graphics. The battery in the S7 Edge has had quite a boost to up to 3,600 mAh from 2,600 mAh, but obviously it has had that screen boost from 5.1 to 5.5, so there is more space to squeeze the bigger battery in, plus it's going to need a little bit more power to power that larger screen, but we're still hopeful to see a boost in battery life, which we'll be able to tell you more in our full review. So they were the biggest highlights of MWC 2016, but for more from the show, head over to whathifi.com for all the news and hands-on reviews. If you want to get in contact, you can get us on all of the social media channels. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, or add us on Google+.